Welcome back to Environmental Economics for the second lecture in this series. This week on the ideas of market efficiency, market failure, and market instruments. The invention of markets may go a long way into describing what makes us unique as a species. In many parts of the world, markets have become so ubiquitous that it can become difficult to imagine other forms of organizing production, maybe especially for economists. How come markets have become such a dominant form of organization, and are there any drawbacks? Most of this lecture will be dedicated to insights from neoclassical economics, where we explore why economists seem to like markets so much, but we also go over some insights on market failures, focusing on externalities. Here I give most attention to a special case of externality problems, namely the tragedy of the commons, including a pervasive but undervalued version of the tragedy of the commons, that of crop selection leading to monocultures. This strategy, as described by Weizmann, builds on the theory of island biogeography that we discussed last week. Chapter 2. A plant is an island. In this analogy, the total biomass of a genetically uniform host is like an island in a sea of other biomass, and a ubiquitous finding of ecology is that, other things being equal, the bigger the size of an island, the more species will be located there. Before we explore this monoculture tragedy of the commons by Weizmann, we will start with a more extensive introduction into environmental economics. Environmental economics can be best described as the application of neoclassical economics to environmental topics. Neoclassical economics treats scarcity as relative, allowing for the idea of an ever-expanding economy. That is, nature is considered as one possible input to production, and as it becomes scarcer and more expensive, natural capital may be substituted for man-made capital, as was described by Solov. Before delving deeper into neoclassical economics, it makes some sense to discuss a few ideas from its prequel, classical economics. Moreover, no introduction to economics is complete without quoting the founder of modern economics, Adam Smith, at least once. Smith, like other classical economists, was concerned with what determines the value of goods. In his search of what determines the value of goods, Smith introduced a distinction between use value and exchange value in a Yoda-like description. What are the rules which men naturally observe in exchanging them either for money or for one another? I shall now proceed to examine. These rules determine what may be called the relative or exchangeable value of goods. The word value, it is to be observed, has two different meanings and sometimes expresses the utility of some particular object and sometimes the power of purchasing other goods which the possession of that object conveys. The one may be called value in use, the other value in exchange. The things which have the greatest value in use have frequently little or no value in exchange, and on the contrary, those which have the greatest value in exchange have frequently little or no value in use. Nothing is more useful than water, but it will purchase scarce anything. Scarce anything can be had in exchange for it. A diamond, on the contrary, has scarce any value in use, but a very great quantity of other goods may frequently be had in exchange for it. According to Smith, the exchange value was determined by the amount of labor it embodies, or in his words, the value of any commodity, therefore, to the person who possesses it and who means not to use or consume it himself, but to exchange it for other commodities, is equal to the quantity of labor which it enables him to purchase or command. Labor, therefore, is the real measure of exchangeable value of all commodities. Neoclassical economists differ in two fundamental aspects from their classical predecessors. First, exchange value was no longer thought to be the embodied labor, but subjective. Beauty or value lies in the eye of the beholder. And second, the neoclassical economists introduced mathematics into economics. And with this, the thinking in marginal changes. Mariana Mazzucato said the following about this marginal revolution. So the revolution here is a change from objective to subjective. But also the logic is no longer one of what is value, how is it being determined, what is the reproductive potential of the economy, which then leads to a theory of price, but rather the reverse, a theory of price and exchange which reveals value. Now that is a huge change. Neoclassical economics has come to dominate much of the economic discipline since the marginal revolution. Let me try to become more clear on what neoclassical economics is by borrowing from Weintraub. Neoclassical economics is what is called a meta-theory, that is, a set of implicit rules or understandings for constructing satisfactory economic theories. Its fundamental assumptions are not open to discussion in that they define the shared understandings of those who call themselves neoclassical economists, or economists without any adjective. Those fundamental assumptions include the following. People have rational preferences among outcomes. Individuals maximize utility and firms maximize profits. And people act independently on the basis of full and relevant information. We can see this maximizing behavior already in the definition of economics by a famous early neoclassical economist, William Stanley Jevons. The problem of economics may, as it seems to me, be stated thus. Given a certain population with various needs and powers of production, in possession of certain lands and other sources of material, required the mode of employing their labor which will maximize the utility of the produce. Here we can understand utility as the subjective value of the produce to consumers. In neoclassical models, consumers usually aim to maximize their utility function through purchasing produce subject to their budget constraint. In such a setting, a consumer only buys a product if the marginal utility, that is the extra utility of one additional unit, exceeds the price. Similarly, firms maximize profits by employing additional labor or capital as long as the marginal returns exceed the marginal cost. This description sketches a very rudimentary general equilibrium model.